What if someone who's been judged their whole life suddenly finds themselves in a position to save someone else? Malik, a 16-year-old black teen, has spent most of his life navigating the harsh streets of the city, always fighting to stay one step ahead of the cold, the hunger, and the prejudice that follows him wherever he goes. He's used to being overlooked, judged by the worn-out clothes on his back and the scruff of his hair. The stares he gets are sharp, some of them filled with suspicion, some with disdain, as if his mere presence is a threat. For most of his life, he's been mistaken for someone dangerous, a criminal, just because of his circumstances and the color of his skin. Malik doesn't let it get to him, though. Over the years, he's learned to survive by blending into the background, staying quiet, staying out of trouble. He keeps his head low, does what he can to stay out of the way, and gets by day to day. In a world that seems to have forgotten about him, Malik's only real goal is to survive the night and make it to the next day. But on this particular evening, something is different. The sky is gray and the air sharp with the bite of winter. Malik walks along the cracked sidewalks, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. It's one of those nights where the cold is unbearable, and he's desperate for a place to shelter from the chill. As he makes his way down the street, he spots the familiar flickering neon sign of a small convenience store, the warm glow spilling out onto the sidewalk. It's not much, but it's enough to offer a few minutes of warmth. He hesitates for a moment before pushing open the door, the bell above the door jingling lightly as he steps inside. The warmth of the store hits him instantly, and for a brief moment, he lets out a quiet sigh of relief. It's quiet inside, just the hum of a few fluorescent lights and the shuffle of his shoes on the linoleum floor. The store isn't much, a small local shop filled with snacks, drinks, and everyday essentials. But to Malik, it's a brief refuge from the elements, and it's here that his night takes an unexpected turn. As he walks past the aisles, his eyes scanning the shelves for something to distract him, he notices the cashier, a middle-aged white man, glance up briefly before returning to whatever he was doing behind the counter. What if someone who's been judged their whole life suddenly finds themselves in a position to save someone else? Malik, a 16-year-old black teen, has spent most of his life navigating the harsh streets of the city, always fighting to stay one step ahead of the cold, the hunger, and the prejudice that follows him wherever he goes. He's used to being overlooked, judged by the worn-out clothes on his back and the scruff of his hair. The stares he gets are sharp, some of them filled with suspicion, some with disdain, as if his mere presence is a threat. For most of his life, he's been mistaken for someone dangerous, a criminal, just because of his circumstances and the color of his skin. Malik doesn't let it get to him, though. Over the years, he's learned to survive by blending into the background, staying quiet, staying out of trouble. He keeps his head low, does what he can to stay out of the way, and gets by day to day. In a world that seems to have forgotten about him, Malik's only real goal is to survive the night and make it to the next day. But on this particular evening, something is different. The sky is gray and the air sharp with the bite of winter. Malik walks along the cracked sidewalks, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. It's one of those nights where the cold is unbearable, and he's desperate for a place to shelter from the chill. As he makes his way down the street, he spots the familiar flickering neon sign of a small convenience store, the warm glow spilling out onto the sidewalk. It's not much, but it's enough to offer a few minutes of warmth. He hesitates for a moment before pushing open the door, the bell above the door jingling lightly as he steps inside. The warmth of the store hits him instantly, and for a brief moment, he lets out a quiet sigh of relief. It's quiet inside. Just the hum of a few fluorescent lights and the shuffle of his shoes on the linoleum floor. The store isn't much, a small local shop filled with snacks, drinks, and everyday essentials. But to Malik, it's a brief refuge from the elements, and it's here that his night takes an unexpected turn. As he walks past the aisles, his eyes scanning the shelves for something to distract him, he notices the cashier, a middle-aged white man, glance up briefly before returning to whatever he was doing behind the counter. There's nothing remarkable about the interaction, just a casual acknowledgement that doesn't linger. Malik knows better than to engage too much. In this world, it's safer to keep his distance, especially from people who might assume the worst about him, based on his appearance. Malik moves toward the back of the store, hoping to find a place to lean against while he waits for the cold to leave his bones. He watches the door for any other customers, just trying to blend in as best as he can. But just as he thinks the evening will pass like any other, he hears the sound of the door opening again. He looks up, and his stomach drops when he sees a figure step inside. A man enters, his demeanor quick and hurried. He walks straight up to the counter, his voice loud and demanding, as he asks for something specific. Malik can tell right away that this is a man who feels entitled, someone used to getting what he wants without much effort. He watches as the man's eyes flicker over to him for a brief moment, sizing him up before returning to the cashier. It's a quick glance, but it doesn't escape Malik's notice. He's seen that look before, the one that judges him before he even has a chance to speak. It's a look that reads him like a book, without ever considering the story behind the cover. He braces himself, already anticipating what will come next. He tries to stay small, not making eye contact, not drawing attention to himself. The man at the counter finishes his business and heads toward the exit, but before he leaves, he shoots another glance at Malik. This time, it's not just a glance. It's a sharp, dismissive look, the kind of look that makes it clear Malik is out of place here. The man doesn't know Malik, doesn't care to, but he's already decided who Malik is simply by the way he looks. Malik stands there for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The discomfort, the familiar weight of being judged fills him once again. But just as quickly, it passes. He takes a deep breath and turns his attention back to the warmth of the store. He knows better than to let these small moments get to him. He's been here before. This is just one more thing to endure before the night is over. But little does he know, tonight will not end the way he expects. Something is about to happen that will change everything. Malik lives in the margins of society, a homeless 16-year-old black boy who's learned early on that the world doesn't care about him. Every day is a battle for survival, seeking food, shelter, and safety, while dodging the harshness of a community that often judges him based on the color of his skin and his worn-out clothes. His clothes, frayed and covered in the grime of the streets, only serve as reminders of the life he's been forced to live, a life that most people around him refuse to acknowledge. To them, Malik isn't a person. He's just a statistic, a symbol of what's wrong with society, and that label follows him everywhere. Malik has never known a real family. His parents are gone, and the relatives who should have looked out for him turned their backs years ago. It's just him now, and the streets are his home. He's learned to navigate the world with caution, always keeping his head low, staying invisible to avoid trouble. He's used to the cold stares, the whispered judgments, the way people cross the street to avoid him. These small acts of exclusion, though painful, have become part of his daily reality. Despite the harshness he faces, Malik hasn't lost his heart. There's a kindness in him that refuses to be extinguished by the world's indifference. Even as the streets have hardened him, he continues to offer help where he can, to strangers who, more often than not, don't even see him as human. He's been told he's nothing more than a burden, an unwanted part of society that needs to be swept away. But Malik carries on. He's learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about keeping his humanity intact, even when the world tries to take it away. On this particular evening, Malik finds himself walking the familiar streets of the city, seeking shelter from the cold. The wind bites sharply at his skin, and the weight of hunger presses down on him. He's been surviving off scraps, getting by with what little he can find or beg for, and tonight, like many others, he's looking for a brief reprieve. As he walks past the dimly lit convenience store on the corner, he pauses. He knows the place well. It's not a store he frequents often, but it's warm inside, and it's one of the few places in the neighborhood that doesn't mind letting him step inside for a moment to escape the chill. The store is a small, run-down convenience shop, wedged between two larger buildings. It's seen better days, but for Malik, it's a refuge from the cold. The fluorescent lights hum above, casting a dull glow over the shelves stocked with snacks, drinks, and basic groceries. The place smells faintly of stale air and cheap cleaning supplies, but it's still better than the streets. Malik pushes the door open, greeted by the faint jingle of a bell. The sound is almost comforting to him now, signaling that for a brief moment he's not exposed to the elements. As he steps inside, Malik notices the cashier, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and a stern expression. The man looks up briefly, his eyes scanning Malik's worn appearance before returning to his task. Malik doesn't take it personally. He's used to people's dismissiveness, to the way he's quickly judged by the way he looks. He moves toward the back of the store, where there's a small, dusty section of drinks. The warmth from the heater near the back feels like a small victory, a respite from the cold air that has followed him all day. Despite his usual instinct to avoid attracting attention, Malik can't help but notice the customers in the store. An older woman rummaging through the discount bin, a young couple glancing over the magazines near the counter. They don't pay him any mind, though their occasional side glances are not lost on him. He can feel their eyes on him, sizing him up, maybe even wondering why he's here, what kind of trouble he might bring. But tonight, something inside Malik is different. He's here to rest, to take a moment for himself, and he's determined to stay calm and quiet, just like he's done 1,000 times before. But fate has a way of altering plans, and tonight it will force Malik into a situation that challenges not just his survival instincts, but his very identity in the eyes of others. As Malik stands by the back of the store, quietly assessing his next move, he can't predict the chain of events about to unfold. The store, with all its ordinariness, will soon become the scene of something that could change his life forever. What he doesn't know is that this simple stop for warmth and shelter will force him to confront not just the cold, but the prejudices that have plagued him all his life. Malik's heart was pounding in his chest as he moved through the store, trying to be as invisible as possible. The chilly air from outside still clung to him, and his eyes scanned the shelves for something quick to grab, a snack, maybe a drink. He wanted to make this moment as uneventful as possible, just another chance to warm up and get out of the cold. But the moment he walked deeper into the store, the sense that something was wrong hit him. It wasn't the usual indifference he faced from the people around him. It was something more subtle, but unmistakable. The cashier, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a furrowed brow, kept his eyes fixed on Malik as he passed. Malik didn't pay it much mind at first, as he was used to being eyed with suspicion. But there was something different in the way the cashier was watching him, an intensity that made Malik feel the weight of his presence in the store. Malik kept walking toward the back, where a few other customers were browsing, but something out of the corner of his eye caught his attention. Near the far aisle, a man was standing still, scanning the shelves. His posture was rigid, his eyes darting around in a way that didn't seem right. Malik's instincts, honed from years of being aware of his surroundings, flared. The man's suspicious behavior drew Malik in, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Malik's stomach tightened. Without making a sound, the man subtly shifted, pulling a weapon from his jacket and aiming it at the cashier. Malik froze for a moment, processing what was happening in front of him. The realization hit fast. This was a robbery, the kind of situation he had always feared but never expected to find himself in. The gunman shouted at the cashier, his voice demanding and sharp, "Give me the money, now!" The words were harsh, filled with authority, but the fear in the cashier's voice was clear as his hands shook while trying to open the register. The store fell deathly quiet as the threat hung in the air. The customers around Malik stood frozen, their eyes wide, unsure how to react. Time seemed to stretch, and Malik's pulse quickened. He couldn't just stand there, not now, not when someone's life could be on the line. Instinct took over. Malik's mind raced through his options. He knew this situation wasn't something he could walk away from, not with someone's life hanging in the balance. His eyes scanned the store for something, anything that could help him. Near the back, by the cleaning supplies, a metal pipe lay abandoned on the floor. It was sturdy, heavy enough to knock someone out if it came to that. Without thinking, Malik's feet moved toward it. The moment he grabbed the pipe, he knew there was no turning back. He could hear the robber shouting at the cashier again, demanding money, but Malik was already in motion. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat telling him to act fast. The element of surprise was his only advantage. Taking a deep breath, he held the pipe with both hands, steadying himself as he prepared to confront the man. His legs felt like they were moving on their own as he closed the distance. Before the robber could react, Malik rushed forward, swinging the pipe and knocking the man's arm to the side, just as the gun was aimed at the cashier. The robber stumbled back in surprise, his expression one of disbelief as he fumbled to regain control of the situation. Malik didn't hesitate for a second. "Drop it," he said, his voice calm but firm, "or I'll make you." His grip tightened around the pipe as he stared the man down. For a moment, everything felt suspended. Malik's voice, his posture, his presence were commanding in the chaos. The robber seemed taken aback, his body unsure of how to react. He hesitated, his hand still clutching the gun, but his resolve wavering. Malik's focus never faltered. He took another step forward, the pipe raised slightly to remind the man that this wasn't over. "Now," Malik added, his voice steady but filled with quiet authority. It was a command, not a plea. The robber hesitated for just a split second longer before he finally dropped the gun to the ground, defeated. As the robber backed away, his face twisted in frustration. Malik stood his ground, never taking his eyes off him. In that moment, the energy in the store shifted. The tension that had hung thick in the air began to dissipate. The customers who had been frozen in fear now started to breathe, their nervous whispers breaking the silence. Malik kept his eyes on the man until the police arrived moments later, securing the situation. Malik, though shaken, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: control. In the face of danger, his instincts had kept him focused, and now the immediate danger was over. His heart still raced, but he had done what needed to be done. In that small moment, he proved that courage and selflessness could emerge from even the most unlikely of places. As the robber slowly lowered the gun, Malik stood firm, his grip still tight on the pipe. His heart was pounding, adrenaline still coursing through his veins, but he didn't waver. The man in front of him, once full of aggression and control, was now visibly defeated. His eyes flickered with realization that his power had slipped away, overwhelmed by a young teenager with nothing but determination and quick thinking. The robber raised his hands in surrender, his body language signaling his defeat. Malik's stance didn't change, not even when the gun hit the ground with a soft thud. For a moment, everything was silent except for the distant sound of sirens approaching. Malik could feel the tension begin to lift, but his body still remained coiled. It wasn't over yet. As the police finally burst through the door, he didn't move from his spot. He watched as the officers quickly cuffed the robber and led him out of the store, his hands still tightly holding the pipe, his breath shallow. With every second that passed, the adrenaline drained from his system, and the reality of the situation began to settle in. His legs started to feel weak, but his mind remained sharp. He had done it. He had stopped a robbery. But it wasn't just about the event that had happened. It was the realization that for once, he wasn't just the kid no one cared about. He wasn't invisible anymore. The onlookers who had been frozen in fear during the chaos were now starting to murmur amongst themselves. Malik could feel their eyes on him, some filled with shock, others with something new: respect. The same people who had earlier judged him or ignored him were now witnessing his bravery firsthand. Malik shifted on his feet, still processing the gravity of the moment. It wasn't just about saving the store owner or stopping a crime. It was about proving everyone wrong, about showing them that he was capable of more than the assumptions they made about him based on his appearance. The store owner, a gruff man in his late 50s, was standing off to the side, watching Malik carefully. He had been one of the first to doubt Malik when he walked into the store. The assumption had been clear. The young black teenager didn't belong here, and certainly he wasn't someone anyone should rely on. But now, with the robber subdued and the threat neutralized, the owner's posture shifted. He took a few steps toward Malik, his face an unreadable mask of disbelief and cautious respect. "I didn't expect that from you," the owner finally said, his voice low and slow, as though he himself was trying to process what had just happened. There was a long pause before he added, "You saved my store. You saved us." His words hung in the air, and for the first time, Malik noticed the change in the man's eyes. It was no longer a look of dismissal or judgment, but something akin to recognition. The tension in Malik's body eased slightly, but the weight of the moment still loomed large. The owner's voice cracked slightly as he continued, his tone less harsh than before. I don't know what to say. You really did it." Malik nodded, unsure how to respond. He wasn't seeking praise, nor was he looking for validation. He hadn't acted to impress anyone. He had acted because it was the right thing to do. It was a feeling he had known all too well, doing what had to be done, regardless of the consequences. As the store owner stepped back, A small but genuine smile crept onto his face, not one of mockery, but of appreciation. Malik couldn't help but feel a slight sense of pride, though it was tempered by the fatigue setting in. He hadn't done this for recognition, but the recognition still felt important. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about saving a life, stopping a robbery, and doing what no one else had expected. The store was now quiet, save for the hushed conversations among the customers who had witnessed the entire event. Malik could feel their eyes still on him. He wasn't the scared, invisible boy they had seen before. He wasn't the kid everyone assumed would cause trouble. In that moment, Malik had shown them something different, a version of himself they hadn't expected. The reality of what had happened started to sink in for the community, and though it wouldn't be fixed overnight, Malik's bravery had made a statement that couldn't be ignored. The next steps were unknown, but Malik was no longer just the boy on the streets. He was someone who had made a difference, someone who had proven that bravery can come from the most unlikely places. Word of Malik's heroism spreads quickly throughout the neighborhood, and the transformation is palpable. The same people who had once passed him by, ignoring him as just another face on the street, are now talking about him with respect. The story of how Malik, a homeless black teen, stopped a robbery in broad daylight becomes a local legend. It's a story that defies expectations and shatters stereotypes, forcing the community to reckon with its assumptions. Malik had always been invisible to them, but now he's the talk of the town. The store owner, now seeing Malik in an entirely new light, approaches him with a sense of humility he hadn't previously shown. He thanks Malik again for what he did and offers him a part-time job at the store. "You saved my business, Malik. You've got the courage and presence of mind that not everyone has. How would you like to work with us here? Help with the security?" the owner asks. Malik is taken aback by the offer, unsure at first how to respond. He had never imagined anyone would see him as more than just a nuisance, let alone trust him with something as important as the store's security. But here was the opportunity, a shift in how the community was beginning to see him. He accepts the offer, though with a humble nod, feeling like something inside him has started to change, something that had been waiting to be recognized. As Malik walks out of the store that evening, the air feels different. The same streets that had once been cold and indifferent to him now feel a little warmer. He no longer has to duck his head when he passes people on the sidewalk. Now, when he walks through the neighborhood, people nod at him, giving him the space and respect he had never received before. The community, in its small way, is beginning to change. The officers who arrived on the scene, who had initially been skeptical of Malik's involvement, now look at him with respect. As he walks past them, a few give him approving nods, acknowledging his courage. The change is not dramatic, but subtle, the kind of shift that happens when one person's actions disrupt the narrative. Malik's heart swells slightly, knowing that the officer who once judged him as just another troubled kid on the street now sees him differently. It's not just the officers. It's the people in the neighborhood who are beginning to understand him for who he truly is. Even the local news picks up on the story, running a piece about the young teen who stopped the robbery. The report highlights Malik's bravery and quick thinking, focusing on how his actions saved the store and protected the community. In the footage, Malik is shown standing confidently outside the store, giving a brief interview where he talks about doing what was right, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. His humility shines through, even as the story grows bigger. The news coverage helps push the narrative even further, challenging the community to question its biases and consider the true worth of the people it had long overlooked. Malik's life, though still a far cry from perfect, has begun to change. He may still face the challenges of being homeless, but for the first time he feels seen. He's no longer just the boy the world wants to forget. Malik now has an opportunity to build something for himself, a chance to prove that a single act of courage can change the course of his life. And though the road ahead may still be difficult, Malik knows that the respect and recognition he's earned that day are only the beginning. In the weeks that follow, Malik settles into his new role at the store. His work is valued, and the relationships he builds with the people around him are grounded in respect. The other employees and customers, once indifferent or dismissive, now greet him with a sense of equality and understanding. The community is slowly shifting, its attitudes toward Malik and others like him evolving. Malik had unknowingly become a symbol of change, not just for himself, but for everyone in the neighborhood who had learned to see beyond the stereotypes and assumptions. As Malik takes his first steps toward a new life, he carries with him the quiet power of knowing that one courageous act can challenge the injustices that define a community. He had taken down a robber, yes, but more importantly, he had broken down barriers of prejudice, proving that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, can make a lasting impact. His bravery has sparked a conversation that could change everything. Malik's life begins to shift after that fateful day. He no longer carries the burden of being an invisible figure in society, the heavy weight of being ignored and judged simply because of his appearance slowly begins to lift. People now see him for who he truly is, someone who has the courage to act when it matters most, someone who cares. In a moment when everything was on the line, Malik showed that he was capable of much more than anyone had ever given him credit for. That one act of bravery, rushing to stop a robbery, risking his own life to protect others, has opened doors Malik never thought possible. The store owner, who once looked at Malik with suspicion, now offers him a job, a chance to prove his worth in a way he never thought he'd be allowed to. The neighborhood, which had once ignored him or viewed him as just another statistic, is now seeing Malik in a new light. They're starting to understand that someone's worth isn't tied to their race or their background. Malik has done more than stop a robbery. He's proven that no matter where you come from, you can make a difference. He's breaking free from the cycle of judgment and negativity that had defined his life for so long. As Malik walks home that evening, he reflects on the events that unfolded that day. He feels different, lighter somehow. The streets that had once been cold and indifferent now seem filled with the possibility of change. The people who had once looked the other way now nod at him with recognition. He is no longer just surviving. For the first time in a long while, Malik feels like he's actually living. His life is no longer defined by the prejudices others have placed on him. He can imagine a future, one where he can thrive rather than just scrape by. The community, now forced to confront their biases, rallies behind Malik. People who once ignored him now see him as an example of courage and strength. They begin to offer him opportunities that he never thought would come his way. He receives invitations to mentorship programs, a scholarship offer from a local community center, and a steady job at the store. These opportunities weren't just handed to him, they were earned. Malik's bravery has sparked something in others. It's made them question their assumptions, and in doing so, they've come to realize that they've underestimated the power of empathy and compassion. Malik's story becomes a symbol of how anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, can be a hero. He doesn't have to wear a cape or have superhuman strength. His heroism lies in the small, brave acts of kindness he's shown, even when the world around him seemed determined to dismiss him. His life has taught the community that being a hero isn't about looking a certain way or having certain privileges. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the personal cost. In the end, Malik's journey isn't just about overcoming adversity. It's about the change he has ignited in the world around him. He has shown that people are not defined by their past or their appearance, but by their actions. And because of that, the future now looks brighter for him and others like him, who have too long been cast aside. Malik has found his place, not just in the community, but in the world. And for the first time, he knows that the world is starting to see him for who he really is, a hero